Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Dr. Cammy Goes Keto, where we are here with the wonderful Mike Collins, the sugar-free man, the sugardetox.com man, where you are looking to withdraw from your sugar and flour and caffeine and have what I like to call an extraordinary life, a really amazing life, if you're willing and able to do the work. And so thank you so much for being here, Mike, and for helping us, go through what we're going to talk about today. And what we want to talk about today is the beginning of the sugar detox, and go back to the beginning, because I talk so much about all the emotional part because that's where I am. But I know there's some of you that are at the beginning that are struggling with getting started on physically stopping the sugar, the flour, and for some of us, probably most of us, the caffeine also. So, Mike, if you just want to start, just start talking about how to do it. Where do people start at the beginning? And certainly going to your 30-day detox challenge is the
Right.
way to do that. And I'll put that link to sugardetox.com in the description of this video. But
Okay.
how do we help people get started? People that are here maybe for the first time, or people that need to go back to the beginning to maybe
Yeah.
get a better foundation?
Yeah. No, I love this question. And, you and I were talking. We always, the two of us, we get going and get excited. And we realize, we might want to turn the recorder on. But we came up with something that I think is super important. And what it is that I have been preaching this for, 4 or 5 years now, is that for 100 years, we have studied the body. Okay, we know what sugar is doing to the body. Fatty liver, diabetes too, weight gain, heart disease, a lot of physical maladies. But our work, yours and mine, and our community, is to show people what is required for the behavioral change to happen to stop abusing sugar if you feel like you are. And what it comes down to is what we were discussing is that in the beginning, and I always shied away from this a little bit, there is some willingness required, some stick to itiveness, some, even if your ass is falling off, is the phrase, you don't use sugar for the first 30 days because the real solution, the real behavioral change happens in post abstinence. It happens after you're free from sugar, flour, and in our program, caffeine. And we can explain that later, but it's all about what it's doing to your brain, what it's to your emotions and your brain, and what you've been using it for unconsciously now for decades since you were a child. You've been using it unconsciously and in a way that's accelerating to soothe, just to take the edge off of everyday stresses and strains. The difficulty lies in that in some people, about day 10 or day 15, the emotions start to hit and you're crushed. Likely you have never in most of our clients, 20, 30, 40 years, they have never gone a week, let alone 10 days, 15 days, 20 days. And in about that time frame, when you're kind of over the pink cloud and you're feeling a little bit better, there's a kind of a freak out a little bit. Like you're emotional, you're weepy, everybody makes you mad, you're angry at yourself, you're angry at other people, and for no reason, for exaggerated reasons, things that they didn't, it's not that bad, but you're still really pissed. And you don't realize that you don't have your normal crutch to take the edge off of it, right? And so it's in that time period, in that first 30 days, that you have to do two things. One, don't use sugar even if your ass is falling off, but you've got to muscle it, and you've got to be committed to it, and you've got to lock yourself away and make sure you've done the house clean out and all that kind of stuff. But you have to be aware that there is an emotional component that will throw all that brilliant thought and brilliant protocol right out the window if you don't understand that's what's happening. If you don't understand that this is going to cause some emotional upset, you're not going to really know how to deal with life's stresses and strains. It's a very common construct in the world of alcohol and drugs in recovery that if you started using alcohol and drugs at 14 or 15, you stop growing emotionally. And no one, almost zero people, understand this happens with sugar too. There is this component that you have to deal with the emotions. A lot of you have heard of emotional eating, comfort eating, and there are huge programs about it. The problem with those programs is that they believe that moderation, some level of, just reduction of the sugar, for don't worry about the flour, don't worry about the caffeine, some reduction of these legal chemicals that we've used to soothe ourselves will help you. And some percentage of people that is helpful. But when you are a sugar addict and you are that 1/3 of people who biochemically can't really ingest sugar without setting up cravings for more sugar, then you need to be aware that both these physical and mental and emotional things are at play. And the way to do that is to be inside of a community where everybody is dealing with these same two things at the beginning, right? Or has dealt with it, and they can help you and remind you and comfort you when you say, I have to have something. And then they can talk you off the ledge and you can go to bed and take a bath and make it to the next day. So I really appreciate you letting me talk that out, because I think over decades, this continues to be that linchpin, that place where people fail, right? And the reason they fail because of not being able to think it all through, to understand what is exactly happening to them when they quote unquote have to have something.
Yes.
That should be clue number one. Like, you have to have ice cream. You're like, no, you don't. You know this intellectually, but emotionally, somehow you feel you have.
Right. It almost sounds like, when you go on the ketogenic diet and you go through that keto flu, as you're
Yeah.
physically pulling off of the sugar and everything, you get like almost this emotional flu,
Yeah.
where everything comes up and you feel like I'm going crazy. And in a way, it's because you're not on your usual coping mechanism of using the sugar to soothe yourself. And you're
Yes.
making the commitment to not be on that. And
Yes.
so can you talk a little bit about community and how important that is? Because I think at this point in time, in your life, when you're going through that, don't you think that that's an important time where community comes in, to be sitting in a room full of people who are like that, you feel like you're going crazy?
Yes, 100%. So one of the things that I've kind of discovered in a marketing way, in a way to get people to understand what I just described, which has, like I said, come down to become the linchpin of getting to the other side, is that in today's society, you are the odd person out if you even attempt this, right? Even if to attempt the zero, no sugar, no flour, no caffeine, even if you attempt it. And so you're not going to get almost any support, literally, even in your own family.
Just
80% of
walking into the grocery store, you don't
yeah,
get support.
store, right? 80% of our folks don't even have their spouse's support because they've changed their diet so many times around the house that they say, I'm not playing anymore. I'm done. I'm going to do what I want to do. You can do whatever you want to do. But so the community is a place, it's a safe harbor where everybody is not necessarily knowledgeable about what I just described, but they're learning and they're growing and they're trying to, make that part of their life, their day, right? But everybody inside of at least our community and others too, they are already, like they've got 2 months or they've got 2 weeks or they've got 2 days, doesn't matter. They're a little ahead of you, and you can, what's the phrase, the slang phrase? You can convince with them a little bit. You can say, this is what's going on with me. And they're not going to think you're crazy. They're not going to think the conversation is ridiculous. You're going to say, my boss is such an ass. I mean, he blah, 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 blah. And I was at the vending machine ready to thing. And I called Juliet and she helped walk me out of it, knowing that I usually, when he behaves like that, go right to the vending machine, and then all of a sudden another light bulb goes on and you start to realize that this has been happening your whole life. The way that you come to it is that, we're tribe animals and we don't like to be alone. There is literally a fear, like 1,000 years ago, if you were to leave the tribe, it would feel like dying, right? And when you're in the tribe that exists now in 99% of the population, 99% of the population, when you're in that group of people, they're not trying to be mean, offering you the donut on day 15 because you look great and you lost 5 or 10 pounds. They say, don't worry about it, one won't hurt. They're not trying to be mean or trying to drag you back. They're believing that you are leaving their tribe. And so they want to keep you in that tribe. And then the same thing applies on the other side where, you are in the tribe that really gets excited about, I got 15 days. I lost a couple pounds, that support. So you're in another tribe. The shorter answer to everything that you asked is that you're just going to join another tribe. When you went off to school, you joined another tribe. When you joined a sports team, you joined a little tribe, a new tribe, a different tribe. And they were all interested in soccer. And, your family was football players or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like you joined a different tribe. You got used to their customs. You got used to what they do. And then, in this case, look, it's the only thing that's ever worked in drug and alcohol is the meeting or the support group. It worked in Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig. And even if you have cancer, you have a much better chance of long-term survival if you join a survivors group. These are proven facts, okay? When you look at a Weight Watchers, some of them just sucked. And some of them have such insane success rates is because a community developed in that local area. This is going back a little bit before they got into GLP-1s, but and they had meetings. A community developed, maybe a charismatic leader or 2 or 3 people who were, and that's why they worked, not the food they sold you or anything else, the points. It was because that community had a great community. And ours is like that for people who want to change their behavior around sugar.
And I do think you really have to take a stand for yourself against society and against what's out there. Because when I would tell people at the beginning, when I was pulling off of sugar and I would say, I'm a sugar addict, 9 times out of 10, people would say, oh, I am too. And I just kind of quit saying it because everybody would say that. And they almost are like, oh, don't leave our group because I'm not ready to leave our group. Come hang out with us, stay with us because this is where we all are. And you have to really take a stand and get into a new group of people that are willing to go through some difficult things in order to heal, and go through learning new coping mechanisms and learning new ways of being.
Yes.
And the other question I have for you is, like say for instance, you start drinking or using drugs or whatever when you're 15 years old and you kind of arrest emotionally in that way. When we're starting to use sugar at 2, 3, 4 years old, what do you do? I mean, are you arresting like in those really basic areas of your life? And then as you pull off a sugar, you have to start, because I found that I felt like when you pull off a sugar, you have to start learning how to say basic things like, I feel blank when you blank. You have to start learning how to communicate to people what your feelings are and who you are. And I know that we have there's a lot of codependency tied to the sugar addiction and
Right.
and those kinds of relationships.
Yeah, you couldn't be more correct, and that's a difficulty. People are raised, and your parents are even complicit sometimes in it. They are raised to unconsciously that little body gets this giant blast of dopamine when it gets a cookie or ice cream or whatever, and a lot of times your parents, when you're upset and they're busy, they use it to soothe you, to quiet you, because you know that you'll be instantly attracted to it. And they've seen the results of a lot of ice cream on a little upset body. And so there's an unconsciousness that develops that says worry, sugar, pain, sugar, upset, angry, sugar. And it's almost like they learn, a child learns to manipulate their parents into, the parents don't want to give them sugar all day long, but they're busy. They have other children, they have a job, and a lot of screaming and crying for a cookie will get them a cookie. And so it's like, and we're talking 2 and 3 and 4 years old and even young, and then it just persists. And then again, like the emotional eating folks, sadly, and I'm willing to debate any of them, understand this. They understand, and this even happens in treatment centers for binge eating and stuff. They understand that there is an emotional connection to ingesting this product and an emotional salve, an emotional, it's like any drug really. For that first 20 minutes, you feel, "Oh, the boss is not such an ass and I got to go back to work anyway." And you feel just a little bit better. And these habits, as you mentioned, are learned, trained into you very, very young. Um, and look, it's you have to look at it, and this is important, and I'll help hopefully a lot of people relieve themselves. It's nobody's fault. It's not your parents' fault.
Mm.
It's not anyone's fault. This is an evolutionary wrong turn that, like cigarettes, where doctors used to advertise it on TV to relax or whatever. We didn't know when Europe grew, or Great Britain grew the largest empire in the world on the back of slavery and the sugar trade, and literally took over the entire world. We didn't realize that, they were building something bigger than El Chapo ever dreamed of building as far as a drug cartel. And that, it started out very expensive, even in the early days. And then it got down to the average person being able to use the product regularly, and it just grew from there. And then took another jump in the 1980s when high fructose corn syrup came to the marketplace. And so the merchants didn't do anything wrong. The British didn't do anything wrong, well, except maybe the slavery part. But they didn't do anything wrong, and no one is responsible or to blame for all this. But here's where we are. We're in a society.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Well, let's work on
So
tackling it.
if you're having a difficulty with it, and not everyone does. Everyone has a friend that can't drink, or a friend who can drink half a glass of wine and will never have one for another month or two and don't even think about it. Same with the sugar in the cookie. Like, they can leave half a cookie on their plate, and you're like, what the hell? How do they do that? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
everybody is neurologically and biologically different. In our world, we believe some of it has to do with trauma, meaning that story that I told about soothing the child, or the child soothing and eventually learning to soothe themselves by sugar, comes from something they're covering up, something that neglect, or, physical violence, God forbid, or whatever. They soothe themselves with the sugar. I think the statistic is, in the binge eating world, 50% of women who go to treatment for binge eating have been sexually abused. It's a
Yeah.
high number anyway, 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 or something. It's not half. So people, uh, unconsciously, now, again, they're not saying, I always use this phrase, like, if you had a rough week and you drink beer, you just need a beer on a Friday afternoon, or a couple, to chill out and relax from the week. You know what you're doing. There's a conscious movement towards this legal substance for you to self-soothe with. But with sugar, it doesn't manifest that way. It's just like, oh, that chocolate bar looks good, and you pick it up when you're getting gas. Or I need a soda, or whatever. It's like, it's so deeply limbically unconscious from the frontal cortex. It's coming from a deep limbic place that just needs a squirt. And I use that phrase, it's probably likely not a squirt, but it sounds good. A squirt of dopamine. You need a little bit of the body's natural self-soothers, and dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA. All of these things will self-soothe you, and all of these things are affected by sugar, right? And it's, in the drug and alcohol world, it's not really the alcohol or the drug that gives you the feeling you're looking for. It's their use and manipulation of your dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. It's them manipulating these things. And by the time you get to this podcast or sugardetox.com or whatever, a lot of that is burned out. A lot of those physical parts of their body are burned out, especially dopamine receptors. In scientifically, they're downregulated. They're thinned out. You have less of them. You have a neural pathway that is almost a command center for self-soothing, that requires larger and larger and larger amounts of sugar in order for it to work, like any drug. Like in order for it to soothe you, you got to have 2 chocolate bars or 2 sodas. You can't do it with 1 anymore. You got to have 2. And if this continues unconsciously, then, as I mentioned earlier, the body disfigure, inflammation, weight gain, fatty liver, all of type 2 diabetes, all of these things start to happen because sugar is a toxin, both a neurotoxin and a toxin to the body. And here's the biggest but in the whole thing. The behavioral change required to stop that progression does not lie in the body. It lies in the brain and the emotions. It lies in the effect, the emotional effect you get from ingesting it and what it's been doing for you, what's utility. It worked for many, many years, but you've outgrown it. You don't need it. You can go exercise. There's a million other ways to self-soothe. If you realize that's what's happening, if you realize that's what's going on, right? So, but most people don't because this awareness is not there. Sugar is ubiquitous. 99% of people don't think this way. They don't, because they haven't seen 57,000 plus people go through detoxes. Hell, I didn't know it for the first 20,000 detoxes. I just started to recognize it. I'm like, wait a minute, everybody's the same about day 10 or 15. They're freaking out on me. And so it's been this trial and error and interviewing all the experts and asking questions about this. What the hell's going on right about then? And then they'd tell me, addiction experts and brain experts. And anyway, you're very kind to listen to this because somehow what you've pulled out of me is, I keep coming back to this word, a linchpin of awareness required for the behavioral change that you're looking for, which is to
Well,
reduce ultra carbohydrates, ultra processed carbohydrates.
right. And to get off the sugar. And I just am so glad we're talking about it because it's really important. It's overwhelming for so many people, I think, when they think about trying to really pull off of sugar and flour and caffeine, they can't do it. They are overwhelmed with the possibility that, that they could live an extraordinary life without it. They would love to get there, but they're so ingrained. It's so everywhere. Ultra processed foods have you so physically addicted that it's difficult. It's not, an easy thing to do. And there's that transition period, right? Where you
Right.
go through, you have to, like you say, you have to muscle it in. You have to muscle through some of that at the beginning. And that's why I think, and even into as you build healthier habits and ways of coping with the way the boss is, when the boss is a jerk, you go call somebody, you go for a 5-minute walk outside, you go do whatever else you need to do, and you develop and get some of those into your system on a regular basis. You have the ability to combat this, but it takes a village, I think. And, you need a lot of like-minded people really supporting and loving you through that. And you have to really be dedicated to it. And, that's why I'm so motivated because of the health issues that I have, all the ones that you listed. Everything except the diabetes going on. And I'm desperately trying to prevent that from happening.
Right.
And how you said about the thinning of the dopamine receptors and how important it is to build those new neural pathways in your brain and those new grooves, those neural grooves that come along. And you can't go down the straight highway that you're used to doing because that just leads you straight to sugar. You have to learn how to be creative and, to take the time, energy, and effort to create new pathways that are going to get you to a healthier outcome in the end,
Yes.
because I want to live.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head in understanding and this um, this challenge that we have, you and I, and everyone that's in the sugar reduction or sugar elimination world is this awareness about, but in a lot of cases, the quote unquote body guys, and some of them are quite famous. They have studied the body, but they're not experienced at telling people this little piece of this little linchpin that we've been describing. And about a third of their clients don't seem to be able to execute, if they go to them for fatty liver, says, well, you got to reduce the sugar. Or if they go with type 2, you got to reduce bone density, lupus, a bunch of other different chronic fatigue. The first things they tell them is to reduce the ultra processed carbohydrates, and 2/3 of their practice can do it. And so they're like, I've had some success with these people. And then, but the other third, they just kind of flit away because they can't, without the support, without the knowledge of what we've described today, can't execute on the suggestion of their own doctors for the physical maladies, right? And when you talked about the neural pathways, it's super interesting because that one neural pathway that has developed since you were a child that says, I'm pissed, sugar, I'm angry, or I'm upset, or I'm
Happy.
happy, happy, right? Happy, elevate it like you're at a party. Let me have a couple more pieces of cake. You want to get it higher, but you're thinking about this, or you've grooved this neural pathway. You've got to close that thing down. You got to shut it down, cement it over, and open and grow a new neural pathway. That, like you said, when you're pissed, you go for a 5-minute walk, you go to yoga, you call a friend, you go to a sauna, you get a massage, you get a pedicure, a manicure, you get a hug. Just Google self-care. You'll get 100, 200, 300 different results. And you're now, when these emotional things come up, you have a new way to soothe. And sooner or later, you take the dog for a walk, your husband will piss you off and you'll be out walking the dog and you're like, what the hell just happened? Because you now have a new neural pathway that says, if I go out for a 10-minute walk, come back, this whole situation is going to look a lot different, a lot different.
Mhm.
That,
Mhm.
and the same thing, like you said, with the boss. If the boss is pissing you off and all of a sudden you're going to be, that guy's an ass. And you'll find yourself, walking down the street and you're like, you walked right by the vending machines and just took that little walk, you know? It's like you've built a new way of processing, self-soothing the things that were bothering you before. That the way that you used to do it, because it's everywhere and even a child can score it for almost no money, it was an easy and simple way. Just a quick evolutionary aside, these reward chemicals were developed to find food and sex, okay? To procreate the species to over tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of years, to build in reward systems that helped us remember that berry bush from last year, anticipate the hunt, whatever it is. And we have learned to hack that system by sitting on the couch eating Oreos. We've learned how to tap into a really powerful reward system and use ultra processed carbohydrates and sugar to make us
Mhm.
feel we don't need to go exercise for that temporary relief. Okay. The problem is, like every drug, it starts to not work well unless you do more and more and more. And
Mhm.
it's a fascinating subject when you get deep into it. The question is how do you and I get this message out? I am going to, when this thing goes post, I'm going to get some clips and I may post the whole thing as it is because you've been very kind to let me ramble on. And somehow I've nailed that linchpin, hopefully in a concise time frame where they don't have to like take a whole course or do it. They just listen to this. And if it makes sense, then try it. If it doesn't make sense, then you might not be an addict. You might just need a reset. And, you just like giving it up won't be that difficult. Right. But for some,
Right.
yourself probably included, you would include yourself as like a freaking brilliant doctor who like struggles a little bit with the final pieces of the execution of the 100% abstinence, just to
Mhm.
see. I mean, maybe we can spark some curiosity just to see what's on the other side. What's on the other side, weight wise, health wise, how you feel, your energy level, your brain. What's on the other side? If we can maybe spark the because I've tried everything else. Maybe we can spark curiosity in people by getting them to 100% abstinence for 60 or 90 days. And I always tell people, like, my only job in life is to get you to 90 days of 100% abstinence. So that then you can see how you feel, what your weight's like, what your skin's like, what your emotions are like, what your brain's like, And if they can do that, then most everybody never goes back. Like they may slip occasionally, but they always come back to the tribe to restart, you know? So yeah, this is
Yeah, and we're here to help you, right? Mike has all kinds of things, all kinds of ways to help you, and we both do individual coaching that
correct.
is available. I think that's something to consider as you're going through your first 30 days. I think having an individual coach to check in, maybe even twice a week at the beginning when you're going, for 2 30-minute sessions,
Right.
when you're going through that, I'm going crazy part, can be helpful. So I'll have some things posted in the description of this video. But we hope that this has been helpful for you. Oh, and the one thing I did want to say was that, we refer to these thirds where we're talking about how a third of people can use sugar, can ingest sugar without any difficulty. A third of the people are what we kind of call harmful users, where they're using it too much, but they're not really completely
Because sugar's in
addicted.
everything.
Because, yeah, it's just you have to start to become more cognizant and aware and take a stand for that. And then a third of us are truly addicts, which is the category I definitely fall into, where it's a very big struggle, and getting it out has been a real bugaboo for me. But I'm really happy to be here with you. Thank you so much for going over this with us today and helping us realize how important this is.
Well, I didn't mean to talk so much, but you kind of struck a nerve because I've been contemplating it for so long. What's the linchpin? What's the one message that I could get to people that might click? Because, a lot of our folks come to us. They've had bariatric surgery, they've had GLP-1s, they've had a lot of experience because it makes a lot of sense with the emotional eating world, like emotional eating. They have classes and educators and books about emotional eating. So they've heard of it. And so if there's a way that I can just shift it, just that word and that work just a little bit, and to get them to understand that last, what they call, there's a lot of different names, that last mile, that last little bit of behavioral change to try it. Like I said, they got 60, 70% of it right. They're just missing the 100% abstinent to see how you're going to feel, and then can you learn how to self-soothe in another.
Yeah, so that's where I am. I am making a admission right now that I'm in, like, I've got 80% of it right, but it's that 20% that's really having me struggle. And so I am making a commitment on this video to go my 90 days because I need this. I need the 90 days. And I've been learning a lot about metabolic health because I'm studying to become a metabolic health practitioner.
Cool.
And so I'm learning all kinds of ways, and they talk in there about intermittent fasting too, which is something I've never been able to do, a prolonged fast. And
Right.
so today I'm going to be fasting for 36 hours with some beverages and some broth, bone broth that I have. And we'll start my 90-day journey. It's been, I don't know, whatever, 10, 12 days or something. But
Quick,
I'll start today.
little insert, and we didn't get to the caffeine, and we can later, and maybe another episode. Um, in the early days, in the first 30 days, now Cammy's much further along than that. Intermittent fasting or 24-hour fasting is not recommended as you in the when the first time you try it. When you get past about 60 days, then you can also, though, if you came in with an intermittent fasting protocol, you didn't eat till noon and you ate in an 6 or 8 hour window, that's fine. Leave it like that. But don't start fasting in the early days. I think there's another bunch of body guys, a couple that are very highly respected that run fasting stuff, who I think short circuit people's recovery by suggesting fasting as one of the beginnings of it. And it's so overwhelming in days 1 through 30 that people fall back. So you can do it, and I do it myself, and I highly recommend it, but wait in a little bit at the beginning.
Yeah, depending where you are on your journey.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much, Mike. It's been a pleasure. I'm so glad. And you're here to talk. You're here as my guest to talk and share. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. We'll have some links at the bottom of the description of this video. Reach out for help, get into a community, and start cleaning yourself up and getting off this sugar and living an extraordinary life.
Cool. Thank you so much.
All right, everybody, take care.